instinctively choose something that does not require me to get on the floor.
Right,
And
yeah.
when I think about what muscles are going to stretch, information you have about when you're doing this right, that muscle will be. So when I'm not trying to get it right, but I'm trying to get an equivalent stretch, that
Yeah.
would be extremely helpful if you happen to have that.
Oh yeah, there's definitely always like, okay, if you don't want to do this, then there's, you know, instead do this pose. But sometimes I see people do stuff in class, and I'm like, oh, I didn't even think of that. So.
You know what? That's the coolest thing about having people who are mixing and matching some of their. Your body's asking for something. I get to watch somebody's body ask for something else. And,
Yeah.
What's up?
It's so nice when that happens. Ah, well, I've been using my marker. And now it's not markering like I want.
Anything in sunlight and pink, probably. It's important. I probably will have to look up.
Yeah. But this is just for my brain anyway, so I can at least get some of these. I'm gonna try to do like some of the more popular poses. And I'll put them in English, I'm not gonna put them in Sanskrit.
That'll help, yeah.
Oh man.
I might figure out the Spanish, but I think Sanskrit would.
Might be, yeah, a little bit of a little different. Yeah, it's just nice to have whatever you need. What else do we have? Warrior 1, 2, and 3. Triangle pyramid.
Are blocks a thing or I have no idea.
They could be a standing or an on the floor thing, honestly. I'll show some stuff with standing with them.
Somebody did a class here and used blocks on the chair.
Yeah, you can use. Oh, Judy, when she subbed for me
Is that who it
on a
was?
Wednesday, really skinny, older lady.
Yes, yes,
Judy,
yes.
she loves restorative chair. I didn't realize how much she loved it. She was like, oh my god, I love it. And yeah, so we did everything in the chair, and she is so awesome. She did, yeah. So we can show so many ways to use. I mean, it's literally like you're limitless. If your mind can open, you're so many
It's
ways.
movement, we'll think about what to call it later.
Yeah, so many ways. And I think people every day are coming into different ways to use them also. And I have a list with me too, so we're gonna go through so many different ways.
See, she said that she used to do it on her head, and then during the pandemic, she got to thinking, what am I doing? I could get the same result doing, you know, something else. I don't know what it was, but.
Yeah.
So,
She's great. Let's run a little bit of light here so you can Yeah, well, those are some of the poses we'll start with, and we'll keep moving through. Get a little more light here. Just
and then just tell us if we need something from over there, because I'm clueless.
No, yeah, you should be good. Unless we're missing. That's alright though.
Thanks for being here. We're proud of you. If you guys aren't looking at me to decide what to do, yeah. I will do what I can, and I'm gonna get out of the long chair, so, you
Give
know.
me the arms.
It won't be much.
I have a super rare energy disease, so I look completely young and healthy in my So,
Yeah, I get it about the invisible stuff.
yeah, no one would ever know. Like, everyone thinks my dog is being trained for someone else. I'm like,
Well,
no.
we're here till 2. We got plenty of time.
Have you been exposed to any of the energy work outside of yoga? You know, have you had anything that really struck you as, ooh, that feels right?
Okay, so some people are still getting
I'm
massages.
so certain.
That's what's going on there.
So, is it just us, Karen?
Yeah, we asked when Felicia's gonna come in after her massage. Okay, nice and cozy. Ooh. How is everyone? We could do like a drum circle too. I know, right? It'd be so nice. Oh my gosh. Start doing some beats. Friday drum circle at the Y. So this is super informal. If you have questions, feel free to interrupt me. They're literally like as we were talking about before, like they're just the poses and ways you can adapt. Poses are so, I mean, it's unlimited. It's just limitless on the different ways, but to keep my brain from being too scattered, because I get really excited, where I'm gonna at least have a few checks and then I'll add some to the table as we go on. I'm just gonna start with our easy seated pose and position, just because that's an easy one for me to think, because it's always something that we do at the beginning of flow. And you can even transfer some of these adaptions. Some of them might overlap, just because that's just yoga is. It's those deep stretches and it's certain little kinks into certain directions or not with the body. So some of the variations of easy seated may just be adapting to, like if you're doing a standing easy seated, it may just be that your adaption is a standing mountain pose. If it's someone who can't get down on the floor. Another one, Michelle, like my brain's like, oh god, I have mountain pose up there. But another one, but usually traditional easy seated pose is with the legs just crossed in, Indian style, upon the mat. For someone who's looking for more support with that, it may be taking, like if you have any kind of pillow or blanket or just something else that supports the body. I mean, you can go to a, any store, thrift store, a good home goods store on the internet, and get any size different variations of pillows. This was actually a meditation pillow, so it's made for a little bit supportive, easy seated pose, where it just adds a little bit more comfort under the tail. And something that we tend to do with it is we always want to kind of check into postures, because we don't really want to be, depending on where you go, you're not really supposed to be seated in this way for extremely long sections of time, unless you remember to have your hips, or technically they always say you're supposed to be over your knees, which you're like, well, an easy seated pose, that doesn't happen. So a nice way, if you have the pillow, to get those hips over the knees or the lower body is to just add the pillow under your tail and then take your legs off of it, and that might add a little height and add a little comfort. Now for a lot of us that might not bother, especially like the kids, they're so limber. We always put kids in, with crossed legs when we're in school and gym class and things. So it just doesn't tend to bother them, or if we're moving through, then it's nice. But it's nice to have that pillow, because as we get older, a lot of the teachers will talk about the hips over knees, so it's a nice way to do it. It's just having the pillow behind you. Another nice way to do our easy seated pose would be, I don't know, a couple of blocks, I'm not gonna need them, would be just sitting on the block, so that if you have any contradictions, even into your spine or sciatica, just sitting on the block in your easy seated pose, that can bring a lot of release and relief, and you can still feel sturdy and comfortable moving through those postures, and just adjust the block height or size as you'd like, or depending on which one you buy. And that's just, it's funny, the simple things that can really add comfort and support to the body. So, I mean, you could even do the same thing upon, and seated up on the chair, too, which is where I'll take that next. If you're moving from floor, it also makes it a little bit supportive when you're going into standing from the easy seated pose. But that's something also that you can do in chair too. Or if you're taking easy seated pose to the seat, you're just coming down into a nice chair, seated, supported, with good posture. You can do the same thing with either, they make smaller, thinner blocks, or a block this big. You could always sit upon the block and have the legs lower. If there's anything going on, that can add some release and pressure, as long as you feel sturdy upon the seat with it. Or another way, maybe just putting that pillow and taking it, a nice simple thing, and just putting it behind the spine for comfort, or taking part of the pillow, like I'll turn side, and just taking part of that pillow and placing it like kind of partially under the tail and have it behind the back. That's gonna help to higher those hips a bit. Or you could always just, like my grandma used to do, she'd just sit on the pillow for additional comfort. So that's a nice one too. She could just have it and just prefer to sit on it. But it has that little height and allows you to really have those hips over the lower body and feel comfort with the body. So you can feel the differences even in the lower spine and sacrum and tailbone, moving into that position. So those are a few easy seated variations and poses. I'm sure there are lots more. Some people say, obviously you want your limbs, but you could always do one if you're easy seated with just the hands under the tail, or under like right where the lower hips would be. That's a nice way just to check in with the self and feel how the body is feeling. You could even try that. That's a simple one that you can put under there and feel that height difference with the hands underneath, right below the like right below our tail, moving from our glutes into our thigh, and then that drop in the body when you take your hands away. And the same thing on the floor. You can just feel those subtle differences. If you're in your easy seated, checking with posture, you just take the hands and place them right under there to help increase with the body. And it kind of just helps the body to support and go into that nice posture, and then just releasing it, feeling how the spine tends to naturally fall back. Any questions on the easy seated? I feel like that's a mouthful.
You know, this feels good
Do
though.
you feel any differences with that?
Yeah.
And you can do the same with a pillow if you want to feel a little more sturdiness. Some people feel, off sometimes with the height, but we even have you could get smaller blocks, and it really just helps to elevate and lift, and you can feel that release and pressure off the body. That's why I always like when we're sitting in easy seated to talk about okay, check in with posture and bring in, engage the core. And other ways, maybe if you have a roller, you could do the same, putting it just behind the spine, just to feel the back, and kind of, if you're looking for more connection with that posture in your easy seated adaptive pose, or having it nice and low, just to support the tail coming in, that's another way. So these are everywhere. They make them in so many different things. They make some that are more eco-friendly and cork and recycled materials, or these ones a lot of people buy them because they're just way more less, they're less costly. So they get the foam. They all do the same job, but they're a nice way to adapt the body also in the tail too. And then of course you can use, just depending on the height variations that you want, anything you can do with a block. You can use hooks if you don't have blocks in a certain place. As long as they're sturdy, you can rubber band them together and use them. Or you can use towels or even blankets. Using the towel or blanket, either using it to sit on or just place underneath, partially again like you would with the pillow, just underneath the tail to lift those hips up a bit. That's a nice way to use over the body if you just want a little lift and nothing too crazy. So it's just the simple things really that can help in the adaptions. I think the big thing here is just showing those adaptions between the floor and the seat, and then in the standing. So like I said, with easy seated pose, obviously the standing is just standing for that adaption. So let me know too if something pops up and you have questions. And then from that, just because of the tend of my direction of flows, we'll talk about going into forward folds. Once again, you can use and have the block underneath in a lot of the same ways we would in easy seated. And then of course, I'll start from floor, then raise up to chair. There are different ways that you can support the body in your easy seated or your easy seated forward fold. So whether depending if you're doing an easy seated forward fold and you have a blanket or what have you underneath, then of course you're just lifting and forward folding in the body, and you can extend and lengthen through the arms, keeping the head lifted for a nice stretch. Or you can always breathe down. You really want to fold over nice and slow, extending the arms and lengthening. You want to think about that spine and that tail staying connected to the floor as you forward fold if you're in the seated style with the Indian style. Legs, if you want something more soft, like I said, if you're not sitting on a towel or pillow or what have you, you could always place a pillow in between and just have it to support the body, keeping it a little more restful on the belly. As you forward fold, it just makes it more relaxed and supportive. So just depending on what style again that you want, how fluffy you want it. If you're in traditional easy seated, or if you're in maybe instead of traditional easy seated, you prefer to have the legs out and bound to angle, you could do that same thing. You could have a pillow in between. This is when I think it's really nice to have the meditation pillow because it's so big. And it just covers, or a normal pillow that we used to sleep on. Then you can just take a nice easy forward fold this way with the pillow supporting the body. That's a really popular one in restorative yoga. Or if you have an easy seated pose, you could also use the blocks to either extend and lengthen for the hands, or you could use it and have the forehead connecting. And usually then here you want to have 2 blocks for that. So just in case the height differences, or if that's too much of a bring over, you could have 2 or 3, or change the directions of the blocks into your easy seated, just with the arms nice and long. You still have the back kind of lifted upright. That's good for someone who has vertigo. As if you're in the it down. Maybe you have another pillow on your belly, and then you would take your forward fold and you can adjust it as you need. Or maybe you have a block underneath the knees to help, and underneath near the calves to keep the knees bent, just depending on what size or length. You could have it low, or you could take it higher, or you could just have the knees bent with your legs and the flexing of your feet when you do your forward fold and extend and lengthen. Or you have that option to use the roller under the knees for a little bit more support that maybe feels more in line with the bone structure of the body, which is really important to support too. And then take your forward fold. So those are a few ways to do it. If you're on the floor, and try it out, maybe with the towel underneath, or if you'd like, just steal a roller, because I have so many of them up here. Whee! You can try the roller underneath your knees if you'd like. It really does give a different way. You feel it again, you're supporting the lower body. If your knees are really tight, you're supporting your feet get to be relaxed here, and you're supporting and feeling the differences in your spine. And it allows you to get a little bit longer. We tend to show in a lot of social media like these perfect movements and poses, but our bodies just don't always all work those ways. So it's so interesting, even in downward dogs, you know, they say you need to have your heels connected to the mat and it needs to be straight, and you go out, and sometimes the instructors are like, no, have the knees bent, have the, you know, the heels lifted. So just these simple things, you know, you want the same benefits, you're just wanting to lengthen through the body. So as you're working with your body, you don't want to pull and hurt yourself, it's nice to have these little offerings. So it can feel nice too having the roller under there. A lot of the time people use rollers for massage, but it's nice to use them for different movements too. And then that same thing with taking your forward fold to the seat. You can have so many variations again. Maybe it's just that pillow behind the body, just to give you a little extra oomph and support as you're going in your forward fold. And you have tons of modifications. I'm just showing you sideways so you can see what I'm doing. But you have tons of modifications. Some people modify their forward folds to take their arms up on the thighs. You just go into the flat back tabletop. Some people go and take their arms down, but the head stays lifted, especially someone dealing with vertigo. Or you have an option, of course, to release and just allow the upper body to fall over the lower body and move into your forward fold if there's no issues with vertigo or anything. But then this is another nice one where those blocks can come into play. And then we can even show the double seated forward fold. Maybe you need a little more lift in the legs, so you just stand upon with the feet, having them on the blocks and extending and lengthening. And that allows you to still feel a little bit more safe and secure with not extending all the way down to the floor, but the hands can still extend. You can even bring another block for the hands to rest on. So you have those options. You could always make it more restful and have a blanket or towel. If you have, some people have like acid reflux or ulcers, so you want that support in the belly, so you just want that blanket maybe there to help support the body. And then you can have the block down below, and then you take your forward fold, and it just feels more restful. Or maybe the hands are here or down next to the block. So you have these options to feel, once again, you're still getting those benefits, but a little bit more comfort and supported with all these different tools. And I forgot to show one with the strap, which I'll go back and show, which you could also use in the, actually I could show the double seated because you can do it on the floor too. So that's another one. On Wednesdays, we do the double chair yoga. And I always tell people it's restorative. Bring as many props as you want. But once again, you can have the double chair if you'd like. If you want a little relief off the feet, you would go into a forward fold, whether you have the bound angle and you have a pillow in between, or you have the legs extended. This is something you can do on the floor or up on the seat. It's just taking that strap, if you're looking for a little bit of a deep stretch, wrapping it around the bottoms of your feet. And then you could extend and lengthen. You can use like the little bungee guys. You can use the strap if you want. Have you done, oh, you have a strap over there too. Okay. Good, yeah, you can just take that strap, it's gonna help. And you wanna line it through the feet. You wanna see if you can line it along the sides of the legs. And it just helps you to really lengthen and stretch too. Just feeling that, you're gonna feel this really in that lower leg section. So into your calf, and then possibly that nice little stretch will creep up the thighs. And you kind of just check in with posture, relax those shoulders down. Then if you want to stay there and work on really stretching the back body, you can even curl up your straps with your hands and then start to bring your hands forward, and you're going to feel a deeper stretch in the back of those legs while you're keeping that posture up. That's a nice way, the same as like a standing forward fold where you're kind of lifting up, but you have that support, your body's supported. And then of course you can always do that on the floor. You can find some release, or you can do it without the strap. But if you're wanting to keep your spine nice and straight and long, that's a really nice way to protect it and lengthen with it. Otherwise you have that option, you could always take the arms up and around and take them down, and they can either land on the thighs, the shins, the ankles, or the feet, or outside the feet. You're extending and lengthening. You want to feel that neck lengthen and drop and relax. You can take the hands to the back of the chair. You can keep them up high if you want to keep a good posture again, if you have anything going on with vertigo. So it's really nice to just have those options and feel the body. And the stretch will move into different points, of course, but it just still offers some differences. And you could do the same. So, oh yeah, your regular seat now. See, on the stool you might fall over and kill yourself. But if you're in the regular seat, you know, without second seat, you could do the same thing, just making sure you feel sturdy on your chair, wrapping that strap around the bottoms of feet and extending and pulling from here in one chair. And that's still the same as your forward fold, because you're just in that nice adaptation of, you could say, even a staff pose, where your feet are extended our way. You're really lengthening through, you're checking with that posture, and then if you feel comfortable, you know, by all means, you know, move forward a bit, but you want to just really, if you're doing the one chair, you want to really make sure that your tail is feeling stable. So when you go to extend and lengthen so that you don't have any accidents or anything, you could always, you know, take the tail back, and you could even use then a block to go upon to deal with the length differences so that you feel supported. How short my legs are. And flex those feet up, and then just lift. And then kind of pull forward or forward fold. And you could always have the knees bent a little bit. Takes a little bit more angling with the block for distance. You have the knees bent and then forward fold again. Or you could extend and lengthen, adjust to what you need, and then forward fold even deeper. Allowing the hands, eventually you could just let these go, or you can hold them closer to the feet. Or maybe just keep up nice in posture. So you can really take anything to blocks again, to the double seated, and releasing. And I know you mentioned using the blocks too on your head, so there's also the option in your forward fold, if you're double seated, keeping those feet connected to the floor. And then you could have, once again, you can have pillows maybe on your belly, so you take a more supported, like cozy forward fold on the double seat. You could have the arms and the forearms connected, and the forehead come down to the forearm. Or you can keep the arms nice and long. But you also have that option to use block. You can use block on the head. Or if or put the forearms on top of the block. Or you could release the pillow. There's so many ways to have it. Or if you need a little support underneath the feet, you can have the feet supported. And then have the pillow again. Some people, sometimes I laugh at the photos I find on the internet, because the lady will have like be just surrounded by pillows and blankets, and they're just like, there's like blankets and pillows and blocks under each part of their body. Like, oh my goodness, so much stuff. But just take it as you'd like, you know. Use the props, whatever feels comfortable. If that makes your belly feel too close, you still have the block here, a little pillow to support. If you like that closeness, you know, it's totally up to you, but it is nice sometimes to have that little lift to help release on the feet and blood flow. So, and you can do a lot of the same stuff on the double chair. A lot of it is what would mimic the floor, which is really nice. So that's one of those things where if you're coming into and it's a mat class, say it's a restorative mat class that I teach on Sunday, you can do it on the double chair, you know, or the one chair, or, you know, play with it as you'd like, and work with your body as you'd like. So there's so many you can do. And then of course for the forward folds, going into standing, if you prefer a little stretch, you know, the traditional forward fold where we're lifting up, let me get all these chairs, there's so many chairs. I'm not in the video to help, I guess that doesn't help. Oh man. But if you're taking your forward fold to lift up, usually we have an option where our feet are nice and sturdy, we're in a nice alignment, we're raising up, and either you're going out for swan dive or you're going and lengthening through center and falling to floor. And you have those options again. If you feel more comfortable staying up in tabletop, that's fine. If you want to fold all the way down and over, that's fine too. It's just really finding that place that feels good for you in the spine. Now traditionally we want to usually leave those legs nice and long, the knees, but it's always nice if you're just starting out as the hands go down towards the ground to maybe have a little bend in the legs or a little pedaling through the feet, or the hands and chest kind of lay a little bit more distant. But of course as you're falling deeper, the goal is to really allow that upper body to fall over the lower body and extend and lengthen towards the floor. And they say the goal is here to be able to get these hands to press into the floor, have the legs straight, take that tail back. But if it's your first class here, you have any adaptive things going on, and it can release for vertigo if you come up too quick. Sometimes it's nice just to have the block in front of the feet. And then when you come down and take your forward fold, you can just take the hands to the block, or you can still have your knee bends, but it adds a little release. You can kind of play with the body, allow the waist and hips to fall lower. You have that sense of release. You can still lift up in your tabletops and come back down. So it's just a nice little way to add some, extra in your forward fold. And you can of course have as many blocks as you'd like, lifting them up. You can even take them up high enough for your head as long as you feel comfortable with that. So that's with the standing forward fold. But you can always just with there, it's keeping the head a little bit higher if you need to, and not taking it so low. Usually the standing forward folds, if people have things going on with vertigo, it's not comfortable. So that's when it's a nice way to make it cozy and comfortable. And I'm actually gonna skip child's pose. We're gonna go to the tree because now I'm in tree mode. We'll go back to child's pose. But I'll start in standing and make my way back down. There's so many ways to do your tree pose. Traditionally, we do our tree pose. It doesn't matter what leg it is. You have all these different options. You can use a chair for support in through standing, or whether you're seated or on floor. We did seated support tree earlier, which was really nice. It's nice to see how people take it. But the traditional is you want to find balance. You want to press the feet into the ground. You want to feel that connection between the foot and the toes, and you just want to kind of get back in equilibrium, roll the shoulders back, maybe move from a mountain pose, and you want to adjust and allow the body that's going to feel good going into tree. So you want to maybe get a stretch through the heels, lift your knee lift, then connect whatever foot is lifted to the leg. You have those options. Tree variations, toes connected, or connected to the bottom part of foot. Or if you'd like, you can always release the hands and bring it up nice and high to inner thigh. You want to feel the bottom of the foot and the thigh pressing into one another. And you really want to feel that thigh going out, that knee going out to whatever side direction it's supposed to. So the traditional is just by yourself if you'd like, or you can have the assistance of the seat next to you if you want to focus on really opening up through the thighs and not worrying so much on the balance or working on both. But sometimes it's nice to keep it lower if you're really focusing on opening up the hips. That's why I like doing a lot in aqua, the hip circles, because it helps us to open up through the hip flexors and just open up that whole area so that we can open up a little wider, because the goal is to just open up that knee and get it out to side, more so than it is getting it higher at that point, which is how I feel. So, and you can do it in so many ways. You can have it where you just have your heel lifted and then take it out to side. And then kind of work from it from there, whether you're using this chair support, or if you're wanting to work with getting it higher and stretching the legs, another nice way is you can bring those blocks back into play. So you can have the chair there for support, have your block, and then you would just bring it in nice and close, adapting as you need, and maybe you lift up onto the block. And then maybe you lift it out to side, and then you lift up. Or you can keep that block there for support, and just keep it there. Of course, adjust it as you need to adapt for your height or your body, just having that foot connected, or that foot facing the opposite side. It doesn't even have to touch the other leg, just using it for support, and then releasing, coming back down to the floor. So that's one way with standing trees. then if you want to take it to seat, there's so many other adaptions too for this trees. It's like crazy. And then going into a nice sitting tree though, we did this earlier. You can always have those blocks nearby again. Or there's many ways. You could just keep one leg connected to floor and then just lift up through the heel and then turn that heel in. Kind of like a nice ballet move almost. Kind of like a little pirouette or something that you're doing, or pivot. And just have the heel connected. And that's a sitting tree. And then you check in with that posture again. Maybe you have your towels underneath, or you're sitting on the pillow, or you're sitting on a block. That's a nice way to add to your tree pose. It's going to give you a little more height into your seated tree. So that's another nice way to do it. And then if you'd like, you could always extend one leg out and then lift one leg over to the right side. You can use your hand to hold up, or you can use, you can use a strap to help hold up the leg. So you got, all right. So you have the option always. You could put a strap under the foot and use it to help keep that foot lifted, or you can put it under the knee and help it to keep that foot lifted using your upper body. That's a nice way to hold your tree up as you're gaining strength in the lower body, or we're having them, of course, checking in with posture.
Can you show the extended leg one again?
Yeah, on the tail or
Where your leg was out.
oh yeah, so just coming out. I'll do it from the side. Just finding support on the chair wherever you need. I like to come to the edge just so it's more comfortable under the tail. Extending and flexing those toes towards the sky, and then actually to the side so you can see. And then that inside leg is just going to come connected to the midline of the leg, or you could bring it up nice and high if you choose and you want to use your hands for support, or like I said, you have those straps for support to help hold it up. And you could always have one hand at heart center, or you can have the, let it lower and use this for support. You can still have both hands at heart center or under the knee pit. So whatever's going to help you support and bring some strength into that lower body. And then just checking in awareness with the upper body, rolling those shoulders back. Doing what you need as you lengthen and extend. So that's always a nice way to go into a seated tree from our standing and our seated. And then we'll talk about our tree back on the floor. So we have those options again. So you could do tree on the floor, seated. So many props. So it would be that maybe half staff pose. Maybe you want to stretch out one side of the leg. You can take that strap around it. And then you could just bring that one leg in, like a half bound angle. Or you could do it without the strap. Or if you have a roller, you could put a roller or a pillow or a block underneath the foot to kind of welcome a little height. And if something feels too tall, you can use a pillow to give it some support, especially if you have anything going on with the calf muscles or had some surgeries or something. Or you could put a roller underneath your knee again. Then you can bring that foot in higher and closer if you like, or you could put it outside the roller, you could toss it on the pillow. You could have just that foot facing that other direction of the extended leg. And you find your half staff pose above, where you're checking out your posture, doing your mudras. Another way, of course, is we go into tree on our backs. So if we're on our backs, the legs are in the same position, but the arms are out to sides, extending and lengthening in mudras or down at hips. If you have anything going on with the sacrum or tail here, you maybe want to have that blanket underneath the tail. Just keep things out of the way. Makes it easier. Kicking things off. So you could have your extended tree and just have like a little blanket or something under the sacrum to help. Alright. And just put that underneath the tailbone. That'll give you some support underneath the body here. That's a nice way if you're in a lying down tree. You could actually, I don't know where that roller went now. But you could put the roller underneath your neck, or have another towel or blanket or pillow underneath the neck or head. You could have a block underneath your head if that feels comfortable to keep it raised up. Or once again, having that block underneath the feet just to bring a little release. You could also, if you have a chair, you could put the chair underneath your foot and have that foot extended, raised up. And then that other foot just out at with the tree. So there's so many ways to take tree. It's all just about supporting the body. If the heels feel sore and you want to lift them up, or if the sacrum is not happy happy and you're treated, you want to lift it up or adjust. You can always put different pillows and blankets and things underneath your body. This could always go underneath your knees or underneath your neck. Really, that could go for any of the lying down poses, like if you're just in Shavasana. If you're in Shavasana standing, it goes back to that mountain pose where your shoulders are back, your arms and your palms are down, and you're just standing facing forward. If you're in a seated Shavasana, it's the easy seated pose in the chair like we did earlier. And then of course, if you're on the floor in Shavasana, you can take it without pillow, you can take it with pillow, just have the arms at sides. You can put your roller under the knees, you can have blocks under the feet, you can have the bottoms of feet on a chair, you could have the roller under the neck or a pillow or something under the head if you want to be a little more lifted. There's so many ways to take your Shavasana lying down. Some people, I tell them they can just bring a blanket and have a blanket over that. Oh yeah, so many questions.
Just a quick question.
Yeah.
Shavasana, the term, you're talking, reducing tension in the body, or are we going for a muscle stretch?
Yeah, so Shavasana just means complete relaxation. So it's
Whatever
different than-
releases tension.
Yeah, so whatever, so that's why Shavasana, that's why it's always the very last moment and thing we do in class, or at the beginning, it can be, just because you're moving from all those stretches and movements to now you want to take that body a little bit of time to resonate with everything it's done. It gives it that time to release anything away that's done and leave with the body. It gets almost a little bit more to the spiritual side. That's why I tend to call it a little moment for peace, because depending on how deep you want to get, that's why we talk about breath and body alignment. But sometimes for other people, if they're doing like a power yoga that's really fast, or even the aqua, you just want to give your body like, like the cool down as we would in class. So yeah, so it's a nice way to just slow down the heart rate and really allow the mind to catch up with everything that's gone in and process everything. So yeah, Shavasana is corpse pose, or like I said, easy seated pose in a chair, or standing mountain pose, but it's just really allowing that stillness to enter the body so that everything can relax. So good question, thanks. I don't think anyone ever asked me questions about Shavasana. Everyone just says they like to do it. But I never.
That's because it means it's almost over.
Yeah, that's probably why I was like, oh, that's my favorite part. Does anyone have any questions about anything that we've done so far?
So
Yeah.
I'm thinking that blue, cylinder,
Yes.
now,
This looks like
if I was gonna do a forward fold,
Yeah.
let's see, I wanna see if,
Ooh, and I didn't do all the four, because if you're doing standard forward fold, you could also use the double chair for those too.
well, I was just thinking that.
Alright, so this is definitely open book.
Because right now, this is about as far as I can go, maybe I can go.
Let's say it might be more sturdy without the block, because it's the roller. Now, usually we'd say you want to protect your facial structures, like with your nose, so you want it on your forehead.
Oh, okay.
That'll help too with the weight distribution and keep it more sturdy. So see if that feels comfortable at all.
Oh, yeah, that'd be okay.
Yeah, does that feel better? You feel sturdy? With that, I think it's always just like, yeah, breathing and taking your time, or even if you had like a tall stool at home, because you know it's gonna be sturdy. But the roller, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and they make these in all sorts of different shapes, and they come in square, they come wider, thinner, smaller, longer. So if you're looking for one that you want thicker or more sturdy, that's what it's nice, because they come in different materials too. And then even with the forward folds, like with the chair, with this, if we're seated and doing double chair, I don't think, I might have touched on that with the block. I guess we kind of did. If you're seated, and you're more than welcome to always just take your forehead to chair. But if we're standing, you have that same option almost. You can take that chair out, do your forward fold, extend. You could have blocks placed here, or a couple, and then take your forehead down to those blocks. Just depending, you could stack up really as many blocks
Does
as you
anyone
want.
ever stack those chairs?
So you could stack your blocks and have it here for your forward fold too, and see how that feels. Stacking the chairs to use.
Yeah, is that contraindicated to try stacking a couple chairs at a time?
I think we don't for safety reasons. That would be the only reason. Yeah, I think for safety we don't, but you could do the block kind of similar to that rolly, yeah, where if you come down, and you could have, that might be a little bit more sturdy. And then if you have 3 or 4 of them even, just coming over, still on the forehead, and taking the arms down. Yeah, so we might,
Yeah,
like,
so I would need more of these.
yeah, let's see, I'll give you my ones with now my forehead grease on them, but let's see what's, yeah. 'Cause if you and that might be a little bit more sturdy than the rolly guy. So you can see maybe 3 or 4 of those might work. I mean, you could literally, I guess I think the scary point with blocks would be maybe at 6. But how does that feel?
That's good.
Yeah. And you still have the
Because
seat
it's a little
support.
bit farther down than I would go, so
Okay.
it makes me feel like I'm stretching.
Okay. Oh, gotcha.
So that's good.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you could even add, a little, use a pillow or use a blanket or towel to support, if there's a little bit of millimeter, just put a towel and put your head on the towel.
Yeah.
And that should help with that too, with the forward fold.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. It's so crazy how many forward folds we can go through. I don't know. I went back to the tree for that. But yeah, it's wonderful because there's so many ways to adapt. So it's just nice. Group think sometimes separating and finding the differences. So that's awesome. I will touch on Balasana a little bit because Balasana is a lot similar to a lot of the forward folds. You're forward folding to get into Balasana, depending on which one you're doing. So honestly, if we're doing a restorative and you're in a seated chair, your Balasana, which is child's pose, which is really just a stretch through the spine, you're forward folding. So it's a nice, easy way to adapt. You already know, Balasana, forward fold, and you can have the hands the same way as the forward fold, having the forearms or the arms extended. You can have your block underneath. You can have your pillows here. So the chair, you have so many. It's all the options I showed for forward fold that we found together in forward fold. Now, if you're doing the traditional Balasana down on the mat, then it starts to bring into, conversation about, what are our feet doing? I'm gonna be sideways so that you can see what's under. Where you want to come back, you're usually traditionally your Balasana, you'll have either the knees aligned with the hips, or you're taking the knees far apart. You're traditionally on your mat, you have the big toes touching behind you, or kind of just in that direction. And you would just lengthen through your child's pose. You have the arms extended, or the forearms here. And your goal is to really allow the body to extend so that your tail is connected to those heels. So you might have the block here to help, so that you feel more aligned, and the tail can stay close to the heels, and you still have the hands wrapped around to support the block, or maybe you have the arms nice and long. But that's going to allow to keep you some lift also. But another way to Balasana, if you want it more cozy or more supported too, sometimes it's just, once again, a nice way that people do it if they don't have anything, is to just kind of roll up the mat maybe once or two, and then put the feet upon the mat. So if there's anything going on with your feet, you have a little protection, a little spacer, and then you can take your Balasana or whichever one you like. You could also do a block at center if you're looking for something more level, and then keep the forehead at the same level with your Balasana. So you have your block here at center, and then your forehead on a block, or you have your pillow, depending on what size. I love the big one. So you can have a pillow of any size and take a more cozy Balasana. Either just go sideways with the face so that you don't suffocate yourself, because that's important. You want to breathe. Or you can use a regular pillow or body pillow, and you can fold it in half and have it at center, so it gives the belly and chest more support. Your head could go out to the right or the left. You can still have that tail nice and back, or maybe the hands come in nice and soft. You're still supporting the feet, or you could have a pillow underneath your feet so that they feel supported. Maybe then you want to feel more comfortable with having the knees about hip width apart, and then still extending into your Balasana, child's pose. But also it could be if someone has, like I said earlier, like the acid reflux or an ulcer, something going on with their bellies. Maybe they just don't want to be on their feet or their shins or heels at all. So then you could do it in our easy seated pose position, where then you're just really going into that forward fold. So you might not get what your forward folds are. You can still fold up the pillow and have it in belly, and just take a nice balasana where you're just really wanting to stretch through the spine, the arms are nice and long, the head is nice and comforted. It just makes it a bit more soothing if you don't want to be buried on your feet, if you have anything going on. So the balasana is a fun, nice stretch. I love doing balasana with that. It's also similar if you have any contradictions and you don't want your feet in. You could honestly do an alternative and bound angle and just have that pillow through or fold it up at center and fall over and extend and lengthen through the arms. You can have the head up to side one direction or the other. And you could have the block out again to lengthen and keep the arms up nice and high to support the body. Because really balasana is a recovery pose, but it's also you're still stretching because you're stretching between that sacrum down through the arms. So there's so many ways to try that and have, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, the explanation of recovery pose, hold up, how does that qualifies that?
Depending where you're using balasana, like when I use balasana in the beginning, I'm using it as a stretch more so. Like we're just getting started, you want to kind of open up through the hips and the inner thighs. I want to lengthen the arms, kind of wiggle or shake and kind of awaken like my spine. But some people tend to use balasana as recovery from like a downward dog or like a high like inversion, like a crow pose or a headstand or tripod or something like that. And you want to bring your body some release and relief. So then they come down and then they tend to go back, and it allows them just to bring everything back down to recovery. You can even take your arms back, drop the head. It just allows them, because they're putting all that energy and effort out,
Like
to bring, now they're neutralizing, they're bringing all that energy and things back in to recover. So it gives their body like that total break, because it's the perfect setup if you're in downward dog. You're lifting up, you're stretching, maybe to a three-leg, a warrior, what have you. Or if you're going into dolphin, you're coming down, that puts a lot of pressure on the body, you're stretching through the calves, or maybe you're going in for crow pose where the legs are all coming out wide and you're lifting up. So all those poses ease you right back in for the perfect setup of balasana, just dropping the feet and taking a nice stretch and like an oh my gosh moment. Like what did I just do? So yeah, so that's why they call it nice recovery pose. You can, you're bringing it nice and close to your heart. It gets the heart rate down for a moment, just lets you recover, especially with the arms and shoulders and what have you. So yeah, wonderful questions. Anybody else have any questions? About anything really. You can take this to a whole new pose if you want. I had just a few of those just to help me stay on some sort of track.
Yeah, I would just, every now and then I have to adjust how I do the lunges, and I get confused.
Oh,
Going in the
okay.
chair.
Okay, with the like going in from standing poses, like.
No, but seated.
Oh, okay. Oh, like our warriors.
No, the seated lunges.
Okay. Let's see if you want to show me
Trying to think of.
that. My brain's like trying to go through its internal library. Like which lunges? There's so many.
I guess, I forgot what you usually do after this, but
That'll probably
sometimes
go
I
right
have
into
to
the
play
warrior.
around with it.
Oh yeah, so those would be seated warriors also and lunges. Okay, so yeah, I'm pretty sure that goes on the same track. Yeah, so those are one of those poses again where it's it can be one and the same depending on where you take it. Or it's so different because what you're doing maybe with the upper body. So the lunges, of course, we're focused on that lower body. But with warriors, yes, I know some teachers who do, me and Colleen, our warriors look completely different and seated. Like it's so fun. It's like just the interesting techniques that we have gained and learned from different places. So yeah, the lunges and seated, that might be where you want to have like your resistance bands or your straps or your blocks again for that lower body. So if we're doing a lunge, and I guess it doesn't matter which leg, you'll just have whichever legs may be seated, like for a warrior or like a lunge style, depending, like a low lunge. You want to have that one foot out to side maybe, and then like you said, you maybe want to have a block, just depending on what height you need for that opposite leg, and come down on that opposite leg for your lunge. And then if you're doing like a different extended lunge, maybe you would take that knee back a bit further, and you'd have that front leg, and then you could lunge that upper body forward to get a nice stretch. Then you can still have that foot flat behind you, or use the toes, or maybe you don't like the feet nice and flat, so you have a block maybe under your feet also, so that that leg gets a nice deep stretch and keeps that leg aligned. So you could also do where you have one block underneath your knee for that lunge. And then maybe if you want to go down for like a spinal twist or a variation with our warrior, you could use it to have the internal hand press in on the block, and then you could go up for your twist. Or if you're focused on lower body, maybe you just have, like if you're doing a higher lunge, that foot just on a block also. But that might lift the hip a little too much, so it might bring some people some discomfort. There's also, if you don't have the blocks for lunges, you could just extend that leg back. That's something that I talk about in my classes when we do the warrior. We extend the back leg or the side leg out and just give it a little space onto the toes. And you're kind of on the, but you have to be careful because you do tend to get with that one, you kind of get towards the edge of your seat and you're kind of lifted up, and some people might fall. So you just want to make sure that you're being careful or cautious, but then it's nice to have the hand supported on the seat to help keep you lifted and guided. Or you have your hands for your warriors, you know, depending on, you could have them low or high or out or supported with one holding and then one out. So yeah, there's different, was there like a particular thing with the lunges or just being confused with them a little bit?
Yeah, cause usually I like, the back of my butt,
Yeah.
cause of my bunions.
Oh,
I can't.
gosh, yeah.
Yeah, my toes, so I think maybe using 2 blocks.
Yeah.
One for my knee and one to raise my foot off the floor a little bit.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's always a nice, and like I said, depending on which way you're doing your lunge, whether you're going out sideways, or maybe you just have that leg dropping out to the side if you're doing a stretch.
Do part towards the lobby and part towards the windows.
Yeah, so whatever's gonna bring you comfort, however the chair supports you, yeah. You can always, that's really gonna add some balance and help with the weight distribution so you're not falling off the chair also, which is really nice for the warriors. Or the lunges, just depending on, so the lunges, it might just be that you're focused on that lower body and lunging, but with the warrior, it's just adding in those arms. So, but yeah, they're pretty, like, so a lot of the poses, they just set you up for the next one. Lunges set you up for warrior, warrior sets you up for, you know, warrior 3 and dancer, and all of them just help you to grow and get into the next pose. So yeah, but there, yeah, you could totally just put, like I said, one under the leg and one under the foot. You could also have that pillow again, like depending, or props or wedges. They make wedges and pillows in like every shape and color and form with all sorts of, you can find like a bamboo wedge or a cork wedge or a cotton wedge, and they can come in rectangles and be anywhere from this thin to this thick. They can be like body size where it's for your whole chest, or a triangle wedge. So they make so many different styles, it's insane on Amazon. Some are just tinier versions of my meditation pillow. They have so many styles. And it's nice because depending on what you're looking for, you know, something might call out to you that might support. Like you might find a wedge or a longer block that's one piece that would be long enough for you to feel comfortable with it being sturdy, dropping down that leg, and still lifting up off that foot, which is nice. So that's something where you just look at the sizes, and a longer cork, and you might find that on Amazon. So that's a nice thing to look for. Because is that what you mean? You want to keep your foot lifted up, like on the toe, like off the ground just, or onto the, oh yeah. So you might, yeah, like that's probably something I'm sure that's on the internet. Yeah.
With my shoes on.
Yeah.
If I made it, sometimes like doing the lines, the bottom of my feet get cramped, so if I have it like that, trying to place it flat on the floor or give it back. So
Yeah.
it look halfway decent.
Yeah.
Not that it look halfway decent, but it feels like I won't fall off the chair or it's
Yeah.
comfortable.
Yeah, so that you feel stable. No, definitely. Well, you want to feel stable with any, you know, any pose. Another nice trick too is just if you're going into those lunges, like one thing again, if you have like the double chair and you're doing, like say we're doing like a double chair class, you could do the same thing. You could take your lunge and just have that second seat there for support. So maybe you drop that leg down and you just want a little bit support, so like you said, so you feel stable, just having that hand there, or to grab for warriors and still get a nice stretch is a nice way to have that too. So that's another way to work it, and it kind of just twists in place with the body depending on the direction.
Never
that
even
might be
thought
another-
about
yeah.
chair for arms.
Yeah, for the arms too, it helps to strengthen the arms and have that, so that's another nice thing to look at. Otherwise, if you're going to those traditional warriors, you know, you can still do them without, where you have, you know, your traditional warrior, the legs are pretty typical, where you're gonna have the front leg, you want that knee over the heel, that back foot, you want it going in the direction of that same foot. You wanna pull those muscles of the thighs, and you wanna engage that core, and then you drop down lower. And depending on which one we're doing, you know, your torso might be in either or direction. But a nice way to do that too in standing, so like in regards to the lunges, because a lot of the time we move from lunges to warrior. If you're in a lunge, depending if it's low, you might have the foot down, you might have support blankets or the yoga mat rolled underneath the foot, or you might have a cushion or pillow underneath the knee, or you might use the hands on two blocks to help support you, or if that leg's lifted up, you have the supportive hands, you can raise up the blocks, and you can always help them to lift you into two, or whichever standing warrior you're going into. And then you can, once again, you have those modifications or period triangle modifications where the forearm's up upon the thigh, or maybe it's upon the shin, or maybe you take one arm down to help and then you come down to floor. Or maybe you have the internal arm if we're doing a twist, taking that arm to block, just depending on how high you need it, and then raising up for a nice extension. The blocks are wonderful in warrior. Then coming back down, maybe grabbing your other block, and using it to go back down into your lunges or down to floor or what have you, just depending if you're triangle pyramid. So yeah, the blocks are a wonderful one to have in those lunges. Another one might be, like you said, maybe having that block and coming down into your low lunge, and then having another block here for sturdy or stability, or having another two blocks here while that one's underneath the knee. So yeah, it's totally, you just want to get that same stretch. Warrior two, you're just all about stretching those internal and those hips, those thighs, sometimes the hamstrings, and then lifting up. So whatever can help you lift up, if you have those blocks to guide you, it can be really nice. You can even drop down. Sometimes we tend to be in a lunge on the floor, and then we take a twist. So you can have that hand on the block, the other arm goes up to the sky. That might make you feel more supportive, because then you're not stretching all the way down and putting pressure on the belly. So that's another nice one if you're doing warriors on the floor. That's always a nice way. And then the arms can always change too in our warriors. We do that a lot in aqua, where we'll have, you know, our stance for our warriors, instead of raising all the way up, we just have the hands in line with shoulders, especially too, it's nice to keep water out the eyes. Or maybe you raise up and just keep the vision forward, or the same if we're in the warrior one, maybe you keep the arms lower if you need, or maybe you have the knee a little bit more unbent, or maybe the knees and the feet, the legs are brought in closer, then you can go into a deeper structure. Because the water tends to move you a bit, so you can feel a bit more rocky sometimes. If you're on land, you can always have that chair there to support you as you move through either your low reverse warrior or a high reverse warrior. So it's all about those ones you guys, I think, pretty much know, but it's nice to still at least touch on those in the lunges. And then you have, instead of this chair being here, maybe it's the wall in the pool. So then you feel more comfortable and sturdy standing warriors, but you just keep one hand on the wall of the pool as you move through your poses too, which is nice. So, do you have any particular questions about any of the warriors we do?
Did you want to demonstrate some more of those, the chair? I don't think I'll see them in the chair.
Oh yeah, the warriors in the chair. Yeah, there's different ways, just depending. I know that Colleen does a warrior in the chair, and she takes her leg across. Like sometimes she'll go into like even like a big toe pose and take the leg out for a stretch or what have you. Or she'll do it where she lunges, like she'll be half standing for warrior, or a lunge and have the back leg seated, and then she'll do a warrior with the seat that way, which is nice or different. Or you can still have that bend and those arms out, and then go into, you know, however the arms are, and feel nice and supported on the seat. Sometimes I'll touch on a warrior three if they feel comfortable. Where we'll come around.
I've never even heard of warrior three.
Yeah, so warrior three, usually in traditional standing, you're just raising up. They also call it like an airplane, then you're extending the arms out. But for if you're working with gaining strength, or in the, on land or with chair, then you can move from that
That's
lunge.
also the three-legged dog, right?
That could, three-legged dog is when you're coming from your downward dog. So your downward dog would be, like you'd have your downward dog here where the feet are back behind you. Those want to be at least hip width apart. Then your three-legged dog would be raising that up nice and high or kicking it back. But for the warrior, the three-legged dog could prep you for standing split or for warrior 3 because you're still getting that stretch through the legs, but your upper body's staying higher versus downward dog or three-legged dog that's going low to the floor. So that's a little bit differences, but you can do the warrior 3 with the chairs. You could do a double chair seated supported warrior 3, where maybe both your hands are just connected to the front seat. Make sure I don't hit myself with that on the ground. And then you just have the leg extended behind you and you lengthen and you go forward here. But you want to be careful that you feel stable. I've definitely had people who thought they were stable and then they thought they just did not get it. So that's the thing you want to be cautious for. Or if you want to do without the seat and you want to focus on extending and lengthening without, you can have the chair just to be there to lift. You could do it and have, if you want to worry about the stretch and not so much the balance with the chair, you could go into your warrior without anything under the seat and drop the head down as if you were going into a warrior or a three-legged dog, which this could also substitute as a three-legged dog alternative if you don't want to go all the way down to the floor and have the leg back behind you, because you want to really think about pressing through that leg and stretching and extending it. But also through the warriors for seated, yeah, you're more than welcome. Like I said, for me and Colleen, I think we do them each a little bit different. But the nice one is you could just drop that center leg down. And your hand that's aligned with the foot that's out outside is going to come out in front of you. Then you can take your reverse or your one, or your extended, or your triangle could still open up and come down to floor, or you could do your twist with it. But a nice one is too, you can pull those blocks in to help, guide you as you're going in, to support the body. Or if you have that foot up, that can be your extended warrior. Or like how Felicia, like you said, having the blocks underneath, that's a nice way. And depending if you want it underneath both legs or just the one knee, that's up to you. It's just nice to have that support. Then you could go into your warrior with a twist.
I guess some people have
Yeah.
that problem where
Or
they're
that.
like too tall to do some of the poses.
Yeah, and that's when it's nice to do the standing and just have the chair for support if they feel too tall and too close to the ground. But that's when I also think it's nice just to extend and lengthen that back leg instead of dropping it down. If you can, extend and lengthen it and you don't mind being up on your toes, or you could even take it out to side. There's no problem with taking it out to side. If it feels all right in your hip and it doesn't bother you and your leg naturally is flexible to go out that way, and you have kind of your inner foot kind of taking the weight of things, you're kind of at an angle with the chair. Yeah, we did that a lot in dance. So I don't know if it's my body does that because of dance or if that's natural, I don't know. Does that feel any sort of way? Does it feel comfortable? The only thing you want to make sure is that you have your inside hip inside.
It stretches more the inside thigh.
Yeah.
That way.
It's going to be a little bit different, but if it makes you feel supported because that foot's pressing into the ground, you're still finding that weight shift on the inside. Your leg is still supporting. I think this was the one a lady fell off the chair. But it was just that, because she couldn't shift her weight. So you have to make sure when you get in this one, it's a little bit tricky where you have that foot out at the angle. So you're just using it as like a stand to help you stay upon the seat. And then you can flow into your warriors that way. You have the same warrior, the arm the leg that has the bent knee is going to be the arm that matches it. And then you can move into your reverse warrior again, or those warrior ones. You can still go down with the block and do a lunge if you want it. That's a nice alternative for the lunge. You can take your twist, or you can take your extended warrior, or drop down for your, if you want to do a deep pyramid or triangle. So if that feels comfortable, how does that feel there with your body? Good, yeah, as long as you have that weight shift, then you're good. You always just want to make sure with the chairs, even if they feel sturdy, that your weight feels like it's distributed to protect you. And you could even do that with the double chair. You could have a double chair next to you to help support while you're moving through and still have that there so you feel sturdy on both sides so that if there is a weight distribution issue, that's going to catch you so you're not going to fall, which is nice again. That's why I love the double chair. It's so nice for that because it really is just like another leg for us, that we can have. Does anyone else have any questions about that? Or is that confused or unconfuse anybody? Of course.
Well, my question is, it's hard for me to do that on my left leg because my left knee is more swollen.
Okay.
Any suggestions?
Yeah, so if it's depending, even on, so I would assume then the lunging would probably irritate it, I imagine, right? If you're down on,
Yeah, I
You're doing
can't
a
like
seated
kneel
warrior.
in church.
yeah, okay, gotcha, yeah, and then out to side, cause probably, yeah, cause that weight's gonna be put on that price, so that might be, honestly, I always do this one too, which I didn't think of until now, is I just take, like we do in warm-up sometimes, I just take whatever warrior side leg out to side, and then the other one, I just leave at a nice angle and
Okay.
curve down in front. And then I also, it's nice when you have the chair to support you too, and you move through. So if that feels comfortable to stretch out in that direction, go try it.
Try it.
Let's see. That's a nice way too, cause you don't, I mean, the whole thing for warrior is you're trying to get those hip flexors, you're trying to open up the body. But if you can take one leg out to the side and your torso face that be your front knee, and then you have the opposite leg out to side, that's gonna totally keep you, it's like tripod style.
Okay.
So you're totally gonna feel secure. You have the seat behind you for secure. You just wanna make sure that you're getting that workout and those twists through the upper body. So yeah, so for you, I guess with that, yeah. Which one would you have as your support, as your main, as your main leg?
This is the sore one. the
Oh,
knee
okay.
part. And this one shortens on the attack. So
Oh,
I've
okay.
got two different problems going on.
Yeah, so just depending on which warrior, and there's no wrong or right, where if you decide to do one warrior this way, but then your body has a different adaptation, so then you prefer to do the other one this way, you're still getting that stretch, because we just like to do both sides so that we balance out. So that's a nice option, I think, so that you're not putting a lot of pressure on the knees, and it still keeps you nice and stable, and you're still working those arms too and opening up. So, yay, that's a beautiful question. Anyone else have any questions?
Think about sometimes when they do the quad or the hamstring stretch. Well, I know that, I don't really, navigate the stretch so well as doing it, so. I'm trying to remember how, cause it's been so long since anybody has done it,
Yeah.
like I think of,
Would it be with, have you done it with anyone particular here, like Judy or Anita or me?
it was for Nita.
Anita?
No, I think it was Judy.
So I know Judy is pretty limber. Anita, I don't think does as extreme, but she might.
No, 'cause
Might have been before my time.
It's just because of my hand, and even I can't, even if it wasn't for my wrist being, bruised right now.
Yeah.
It's like, I can't get the, coordination right to, like, raise it with the strap.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Are you seated when she does the raising, or do you
I
do
was
standing?
but I didn't, bother to ask her how to do it seated.
Yeah. So okay, so the hamstring work is just taking the leg back then,
That's the,
or is she doing raising it or extend it out?
Take that leg back.
Taking it back then. Okay, yeah, depending on the, where she puts the strap, usually that's like a good prep for like our dancer pose. So you could do that, obviously with hand if you wanted, to have the foot supporting the leg stretch. You could always have it, if you're standing, having that nice seat support, or the chair support, and just extending that leg back is always a nice way to do it, or with the hand. But if you're working with stretching and you need a little more space, you could always take the strap around the heel, and then you come about, and you wanna I feel like you want to keep it in line with your hip, but that might change depending on, you know, where you're going with the stretch. So some people might just wrap their hand around and lift it up, and your knee might go out. That's just going to bring it to a deeper hip opener. But if you're focused on the thighs and the quads and hamstring, you might want it out through here, or then you might take it out through the side. But if you're standing, also they might do the share like do with extended leg or with the knee bent, because you can have it with extended leg out also and take it out or take it back or out to the front and just swing your leg around. Really, that's a nice way to do the full leg. Yeah, we do. But not so much with the strap and aqua, but we do that, yeah, and aqua too. But you can also, I mean, kind of add kind of like the same with our warriors if you're doing it seated. You know, either if you have the bricks or not, or the blocks, you could still wrap that strap around your foot and then just come into that same stance that you would with warrior. Get your support system with the other side and just lift up if that feels comfortable. Or sometimes some people take it overhead. If that feels comfortable for you, you're gonna get that support and that feel through it, which is a nice way to do it seated. You know, and it's still gonna give you a good benefit and a good stretch. It's gonna be like, kind of like with any exercise, you have the primary and secondary. So you might have the primary, you know, muscles that it's really hitting, then you always have the secondary points in the body that it's hitting and stretching. So that might change a little bit. But if you feel more supported with seated and doing that, then why not? So that's always a nice.
More hip stretches because I have tight heels.
Yeah. So we can that's when a lot of the openers will come in, like for goddess pose is good for that, or balasana. Bound angle. The bound angle, which we do in the restorative seated, where we have like both feet up on the thing, or you could have them down connected to floor, but I think that feels a little more funky. But if you have both feet up, the balasana, when you're coming over and you have those knees falling out to side, that's a nice way to open up through the hips because your upper body's putting that pressure on the lower body. So that's a really nice way to open up. And then if you want support with doing that, you can always do it on the floor and have blocks underneath the knees, which is always a nice way, and that's gonna open up the hips still. So you have your balasana, but you have the blocks underneath the knees to help, and then you still take that forward fold. You're gonna feel that pressure. It's not only gonna allow your spine to lengthen, but you're opening up the lower body that way. A nice way to do that with standing would be some plies, like go back to like ballerina style, where if you have, you know, you could do the standing where you do like, this is just honestly a runner's warm up, but and stretch. A lot of hurdlers do it. We always did it. My little short butt did hurdles. So it's a nice way to open up the hips though. And those hip flexors. Of course you have your circles that we do. Well, that's why it's nice to have the chair here. So the chair, or if you're in the pool, using the wall to keep you stabilized, and then just doing knee lifts and then extending it back, or taking it out to side with the side to side like we do. That's going to open, or the hip flexors like we do with the foamies with us in the noodles. That's a nice way. Another nice one is to have a table or counter or chair or whatever that's going to help support you. And you could even have the mat underneath you, and just taking that wider stance and just doing like our goddess position, where we're going out and those legs, that's going to open up through those hips, that groin area, and then that's going to open up into the upper body in our goddess. But we do that seated too, so you have that option there. So you can always take your goddess, I hate my body feeling unlevel now, in your seated pose, and you're really just opening up those legs, and you really want to focus on, goddess is all about getting those feet out. So you could focus on 1 day or 2 days or whatever of the week on just opening up, taking the legs about chair width apart, taking those feet out, the heels coming in, and that's going to start to open those legs and those hips out. And the more you do it, you'll just your body will slowly start to open more and more. And with the chair, it's nice because then you don't have to worry so much on the balance. You can just worry about the stretch, opening up through those inner thighs and hips into those hip flexors and getting those feet out more and more. You can even have a chair in front of you and then go into a forward fold with it, or you can open up through your goddess, which is going to help you open up through that whole center and body. Of course, course, you could do that standing if you wanted. Like, you're working on more of that balance there too, though. So that's why it's nice to still have a chair, and then you can drop down lower, and that's really gonna open up those hips. But you can have a chair there to help you with that, and that's just like your nice little squat position almost, or play. You have the toes out, the heels in, checking with that posture, and just slowly drop down as much as you can. You're gonna feel that opening through the hips. So that's a nice way to work with that too.
You were saying that was all, like all the stuff was good for prepping for dance pose. What is the
Oh,
goal?
yeah.
What is that? Where are we eventually looking to get stretches in that?
For that, yeah, the hamstring well, we're really into the hip stuff too, but yeah, the dancer pose, any of that hamstring or quad stretches, like taking the legs out or the lunges or even your warrior three, that's all gonna help for dancer pose. I honestly, with my glutes are so tight and into my hamstrings, I usually have to stretch like 2.5 hours to even get like anywhere near for dancer pose. Because dancer pose, a lot of typical like ballerinas do with the way their bodies stretch, where you're just taking your toe all the way up and your arms sometimes will go overhead, and especially if they have longer legs, it's just easy for people with long legs to grab their feet. But that's why it's nice to have the strap, because that's, if you're looking for that hip opener and that strap, that's all it is an extreme hamstring and hip opener. You're just taking that foot out and you want to raise it up and lift it up as much as you can and keep lifting it up and fall forward. But you just want to keep going. You want to lift it up as far as possible. That's the goal with that one. But depending on, then you want to make sure that you still stretch out the spine, and that's when Cobra comes into play, and up dogs, and down, so that you feel prepared from toe to through the back. So, and then it just gets higher and higher and higher. But for me, it's like a 2.5 hour stretching every little limb before I ever get there. But that's just, yeah. I mean, some people, like I said, depending on their bodies, like kids, their muscle structures aren't so, they haven't been just yeah, like walking into one certain thing. They don't have that mindset of like, oh my god, my back. So they do all the time. They just like lift things up and grab them and shoot things over there, and do different pretzel pose, like more contortionist style. But they're just young, so they're more flexible by nature. I mean, a lot of people would go into wheelbarrow, no question, or a bridge pose, a full-out bridge pose. When we're kids in the grass and roll down a hill. But I think as we get older, we conform our bodies to sitting so much and walking or driving, and then some people get the hunched spine, and we don't check in with that awareness and posture, and then those things seem like, oh my god, can I ever do that again? Which you can. You just have to work at stretching the body again, and you can totally do. There are yogis who are like 100 years old who are still doing that stuff, so no one can ever say never. Because if you look up some of the yogis, I mean, those men, the positions they could get into, and they were well above all of our ages. I mean, it's amazing.
Do you have a preference when you go to, because it's gotta be real individual for everybody, right? The stretch from the bottom up or the top down before you go into the extra.
And then
When somebody's trying to expand their range and they're trying to do it incrementally, is there any, guidance for you start down, make your way up, and make sure that's sturdy before you do this, or is it vice versa? Any opinion?
Depends on the teacher. Like some teachers, when they start asanas, or depending on, and this could be on depending on how far they take it, like if you're doing a sunset flow versus a sunrise flow, or vice versa. If you're looking for, a lot of them have a peak pose in their flow, so maybe their peak pose is dancer pose. They're just gonna want to stretch out all the proper muscles to get into dancer. So I think it could vary person to person. By my subconscious nature, I tend to work out my lower body more, which is the reason why it's so tight. And then a lot of my dance and stuff I did include with my upper body. So my upper body is just loose and flimsy all over the place, and I can do things with it. And then my lower body is like, no, we're good today. So for me, I have to focus, and like I will take 2 hours in a practice and stretch out just my lower body and into my sacrum and into my lower spine, and then I'll make my way up. But I mean, depending on the flow, like here, we look at the wide. People when we go to classes, it's just okay, full body stretch with adaptions or courtesies of what else is going on with with the members and stuff. So that's why I like to start on the floor, and we do the upper body, and then we'll jump into center, and then I'll go to lower body, and then we'll do a downward dog to get the full body stretch, and then we'll raise up into whatever we're doing. But there are then move up and release anything out of their body or something. So, but I think it is probably more typical to see them start from head and move down to tail than from tail up. But yeah, but then when you get into your own practice, it's definitely like, all right, what is my goal here for this practice? What am I trying to do today? Do I want to focus on dancer pose, or do I want to focus on my arms are tight and I want to get into an elephant face pose or something, or a lion's breath to help, maybe there needs to be maneuverability in the neck or in the shoulders if they're really tight, or in the, out in the arms and doing stretches here to release. And that could even release and play depending on poses, if you have a headache or you have heartburn or something going on, you might want to play with the upper body more to release those symptoms through your poses. So
What is lion pose? That's the first time I've ever heard of it.
Oh yeah, well it's called like lion's breath or lion pose or lion face, where you're just kind of roaring like the lion. I tend to do it sometimes. Usually if you're going through cat-cow, you'll do it. It's just closing the eyes, lifting the chest down, and sticking out the tongue. And then bring it back in. Because it looks silly, and I think a lot of people don't like to do it. It feels so good.
Usually do that at the ends, stretching the face.
Yeah, it's good because we forget about that.
Jaw thing, and
Yeah.
get the jaw connection.
Yeah, I love like face yoga. If you want, I have a face yoga on my Instagram, but if you go on to YouTube, you can find like people like just face yoga, and it's the videos, their whole face, and it's just doing like little massages, stretches, because we do, like, we forget, like, I mean, especially like even for feminine, like our mouth is the same as below, like these different parts and connections that our bodies have that we forget about. So then if you stretch and release something up here sometimes, it can release something somewhere else and heal or kind of connect with it. I think, like, I love to talk about, like that one back, like doing a forward fold, that literally stretches out every single part of those back muscles in your full back. And we forget that it's like one giant muscle. We're connected from foot to all the way through our spine up to our crown. That one muscle that goes all through. And so it's nice to get those stretches and rolls and things for that. But yeah, the lion's face or lion's breath or lion's pose, just that's sticking that out like in Colleen's class. It's so good though. It's such a nice way. Or they make these quartz rollers, like rose quartz or jade or white quartz, and they're rollers they're just specifically for your face, and you use them like, just to release and kind of bring a refresh and cooling and stretch in the face. And they're affordable. They're a few bucks depending on where you get them, or if you get an eco-friendly one, or what have you. But those are nice because it's so important to stretch and do the face yoga too. It's a nice one to look at, and you will literally feel like the release. You're like, oh my god, the stress and tension around my eyes feels better.
When you
The
go out
nose.
giggling at each other, it just looks so funny.
Yeah, it looks funny, but like go home when you're by yourself, like in the bathroom, and just try it and be like, no, this is good.
Stuff will do in public and stuff we won't.
Yeah, exactly. And then like, I remember like feeling silly when I did because I did it live and the face yoga. But then I was like, I don't care anymore because I feel great after it. Like just getting the stretches and opening up and then coming back and taking it out. And opening, like you really feel just the tension and the release in the body, and like you can feel it in other parts of the body. It's like, then you don't care if you're doing public.
A lot of times when you get a real deep yawn and then right here hurts like, I don't know what, like somebody punched you.
Yeah, or you feel like a crack, like in your face, because you haven't like moved it. But if you do those face massages, or those face yoga moves, they're so nice. They're so, and it helps to relieve some of that. Then when you do that stretch, you don't have that. Like, do you see there's a lady right now, I forget her name, but she is the lady with like the world's biggest mouth, and they always tease her because all she does is stuff food in her mouth. But she does all these stretches, so her mouth is literally like, she has stretched it so it's just so like elastic, it's like elastic.
I don't know if that would be a personal
Fit.
goal.
That's not my personal, but it's just how relaxed she has gotten her muscles and her face to be, like to stretch and have that. Like she probably doesn't get those little cracks that, we might hear when we yawn in our face, and it's just taking
It can be
time.
helpful with a visit to the dentist when they have you.
Yeah.
Mouth open.
Then you get, like your muscles hurt by the end, because that's why it's good to do those stretches. It's just little things, but the thing with the eyes, taking our vision up to the wall and the ceiling, then bringing it back down, taking it to the floor, and side to side. Even if your eyes are closed, if your eyes are still moving, or they say circling the eyes one way and then the other, and blinking and opening, and yeah, all that stuff just like really brings a new sense to the body. It makes the face happy. Little bit. Were there any particular poses also too that you guys had questions about that I haven't mentioned or that I'm forgetting? That you have one that you maybe heard about, like the question with the dancer and the hamstrings was good. For Cobra. Oh, that's the one on my paper right now, so that's the one on my little sheet. Yes, that would be. Let's see. I'm gonna look up some more of the hamstring to see if I missed anything. Oh, maybe that was the one. Okay, so I'll do a hip cobra and then I'll go back on hamstring because I think maybe that was because the way your lunge was probably half split pose. I think you were thinking for your hamstring. So, all right, so we'll go for cobra. Oh, where you go? Cobra. Okay, so yes, cobra's a nice one. There's different ways to do it. I'll start seated just because these chairs are here. So for a seated cobra, might be similar to our cat-cow, where you can have different ways. If you're in one seated, you can do cobra with bringing the arms in alignment with shoulders and just lifting up and then untensing and unreleasing, or then bringing it back here. And you could even do that against the wall. So say this chair was like my wall, you just have the hands here. You want to lift up like you would in a cat-cow, taking the tail back and then just release. So that's one way to do the cobra. Are you thinking cobra traditional, like on the floor? Oh. Okay, yeah. I was like, oh, because we could do that in standing and aqua. You could be have your hands and palms against the wall and lift up through the crown of the chest, and that be your cobra. Because your cobra, you're just welcoming that spine stretch. So you want to have, instead of the feet being flat, low, you would just have them connected to the floor, and the knees underneath the hips, or legs underneath the hips, and have those arms in alignment with the shoulders, and kind of press them back, or press them against the wall as you're lifting up the chest, and then release, and that's gonna give that same stretch into the chest. Otherwise, there are other cobras. If we're coming down to the floor or mat, traditionally where we do our cobra laying on our belly, same thing. You have those hands aligned with the shoulders, and then you would lift above, lifting still through the chest, but instead of going backwards, you're just lifting up towards the sky. And instead of your head facing forward, you can tilt your head down in alignment, so you have that nice little alignment in spine, curve in the spine to keep it aligned. And then you just bring it back. But a nice way to adjust that too is to keep the hands connected to the mat. You have the feet nice and flat behind you. You could have the back of the mat rolled up underneath the feet to give some support, if that does, for your body. And then you could just keep those hands pressed against the floor and raise up and stretch also. Lifting up, so that's different from Sphinx. You're still lifting up the arms and you're lifting through the chest. And that's gonna give you a nice stretch. You could also do that with blocks. Or maybe you have the blocks here and you don't want your face or maybe as low to the ground. You would just press the hands into the blocks and lift up. That's a nice way. Or if you don't want to be on belly, like if someone has ulcers or any contradictions going on, or maybe someone's gonna have a little human inside of them. So maybe you don't want to be on your belly for cobra, and you might want to bring your knees back and have your arms here. You can do a seated cobra where you just gently press the palms and lift through the chest here too. So there's different ways, or you could have it extended out and then lift up like you would in the cat-cow, but it just takes it a little bit more extended into it. And those are nice little ways to adapt cobra. Huh?
You do that one again.
Oh yeah. So you have instead it's almost like you're setting up for cat-cow, but it allows you to go a little bit deeper into the head. You still have that tilt with the head. You kind of be at an angle. You would just press the palms into the blocks and lift through the chest, and that tail would come underneath. And then you're gonna feel that stretch primarily in the spine, and you're gonna feel it through the neck. So that's a nice way if you don't want to be on belly, if you have anything going on.
So what is else
Those are all.
Except for the spine, what else is that stretch good for?
For Cobra, you're strengthening through the upper body too in the arms. You're strengthening through the shoulders, the shoulder blades, because it's also strengthening you for that same. It's going to strengthen you for inversions. It's going to strengthen you for a three-legged or dolphin pose. Because you start with, that's why I always like to start with Cobra, where you have the hands either planted and you lift up, because you're gently pressing those palms into the mat, or you're lifting through the chest, or you're lifting up, strengthening. It also can help you with reverse bridge, where you take the arms back, you have the feet connected and you lift up. Or it can lift you and help you for Superman, where you're taking the arms out nice and high and long and lifting the legs back. Or you can do it for locust, where the arms are kind of like the wings of the locust and you're lifting up. So it's just strengthening and adding more flexibility into the body. So it's a nice, nice stretch. And you can even do that, like the locusts are different variations of that. If you don't want to be on floor, you can still take those arms back and lift up that chest nice and high, and that's your seated locust. And that's Cobra's going to help you with that. So if you're in seated and just bringing those arms back, that's a nice way to get into Cobra too. You're just really bringing the focus on that higher spine, like so that you could have the hands connected to a wall or a chair if you choose to. So that's a nice one. That's like, oh, hello. So I'm trying to think. I had some other ones listed too. We did our Cobras. We did almost all that fun stuff. So let me see. We did our bound ankle. Bound ankle, you can always have blocks under the knees too. Ooh, okay, yeah. We'll do downward dog is a good one because that's in like every freaking flow in the world. So we'll start because it's, I guess, well, yeah, I'll start on floor, traditional downward dog, because that makes sense in my brain, I guess. Keep track of what we're talking about. If I see it on this mirror in the video, then I'll know. Like, okay, we talked about that one. So many ways to do downward dog. So because if someone feels like they don't know how to get down, there's always a way on how to get down. So if you're downward dog, and this goes into even like you don't have to have your heels connected fully to the floor. You can always, there's always different adaptions. So I'm gonna keep these over here. So our downward dog, typically if we're going from the floor, and then I'll do it with chairs and such after, usually get that nice full body stretch. And either you're swan diving or you're taking the arms through and you're going into your downward dog or forward fold, and then you're crawling the hands out. And you want a really traditional or the more, I guess, together floor version of downward dog is you want to have those feet about shoulder width apart, the palms are gently pressing into the mat, the spine's going to align with the arms, and the feet, you can always pedal the feet, you can have a little bend in the knees. You really want to make sure that spine is in line with the arms there. And then worry about the heels going to the floor. And then lengthening or pressing them in. And then another variation, just for random note, is this would be another variation of mountain pose. If the feet are nice and close, so you're bringing even a deeper stretch to the back of the feet. But not everybody wants to do the traditional downward dog, or maybe there's something going on. I love offering adaptions where you can still just be on all fours, and you can take the arms out nice and long and align the spine. That's going to be a nice downward dog adaption. Taking the arms nice and long and the tail high. That's going to be a nice adaptation. If you don't want to be on the knees, you could always just have the arms in alignment and then just lift off just gently off the knees. Kind of get a nice adjustment on the arms here. And then instead of lifting up, or you have a light bend in the knees, instead of lifting the leg up high for three-legged dog, you might just kick the leg back and then bring it into whatever we're doing. Is a nice alternative for that, or the heels, or maybe just lift it over the inner leg instead of high over the tail when we open the hips out. So that's a nice alternative for that. But then there are other alternatives for downward dog. If you have anything going on, you always have your handy dandy blocks. So if you can feel sturdy and safe on the blocks, you can go ahead and gently press the palms into the blocks and then take the tail up nice and high. And that's your downward dog. Yeah, and then you can still keep it low or keep that leg up nice and high. Now some contradictions with the blocks is people sometimes don't feel sturdy going into three-legged dog. So either you don't have to go into three-legged dog or just really take your time breathing. So in a power yoga class, you tend to move really fast. So just breathe through, stretch out the leg, maybe keep it lower, maybe keep a gentle bend in the knee so that you feel safe when you're coming in through. This is going to help when you go into those lunges also, because because you'll have that extra space with the hands being on the blocks. And your hands are can keep the blocks pretty sturdy because you're putting all that pressure on the hands. So it helps to keep that weight pressing down into the block so that it stays nice and soft. So that's one way to do an alternative with the downward dog, is having those blocks. Another way, which I love having the chair on my mat, because then I just wash it or whatever after. I don't worry about too much about the germs. But this is a nice way, another alternative for the downward dog, is instead of taking the head low, if you have anything going on with vertigo, you're still gonna get the nice stretch of the legs, the heels can be nice and flat. And you just have the arms holding onto the seat, and you align the spine. And you can flow through, that would be your plank, that would be your three-legged dog, that could be your lunge, you know, and you could lunge in then with here's your lunge, and then here's your warrior two, so you know how to get there. If you're going down to cobra, you could always just lift through cobra here, or maybe that's your up dog, and then back to your down dog. So you can do the whole line of Vasana and flow and chaturanga with that chair if you prefer to be up for your downward dog. So, and you still have that height, you can still take it, you know, as far as light as you want to go. You have that chair there. There's also, you could do a seated downward dog. There's no problems with that at all. So you would probably have the double chair, maybe single. Double chair would probably be easier for it. But if you want to do seated downward dog, it's almost the same as our forward fold. So maybe instead of worrying about the lower body, or you don't have the lower body going through, you just focus on the arms in your downward dog, you take them through and extend and lengthen through the spine. You have the tail going back, and here's your downward dog variation and seated. And the same, you can still move up. There's your up dog. Maybe you don't worry about, or you take the arms down low for plank, or maybe your cobra, your arms come up or onto thighs and you lift up for your cobra, and then plank, and then back to your, you know, your downward dog. So the only thing you wouldn't have going on is the kicks, of course. You might not have those kicks going back. Or maybe when they go into three-legged dog, maybe you just take the leg out to side and get a nice stretch with that leg out to side, and then pull it back in when they bring it through. So that's a seated downward dog. I don't see that too much, but I mean, it's doable, it's possible. So you don't ever have to think that it's not. I'm just see if they had any other ones, variations of the downward dog that I'm not thinking of. Downward dog is a nice one. No, those are pretty much. Yeah.
Sun salutations.
If you have problems with balance or vertigo or things like that, but still can kind of are getting into those stretches, is there tricks like the chair in order to like thinking about like transitioning in and out of them, like worrying about stability and not falling, like because it's not the easiest position to get into and in terms of stability and stuff until you get really good at it. Is there a trick to like, you know, help you get down into it easier or
For downward dog, I think.
I think it's more getting out of it. I think that people struggle with. I guess sometimes you can just go to the floor.
Yeah, I would say the adaption would be, yeah, like you could do the seated, where you're just kind of working on the arms and the extension between there. If you wanted to practice more and getting that vertigo or getting over any of those things, you could always, you know, try with taking the arms out and that extension here. Still seated, but that still might bring some vertigo to the head. So I would say, yeah, the easiest maybe going from that transition would be doing it from that floor. That's why I tend to like going into a downward dog from all fours, because if you're already here, then you have that option to press those palms out, and you could just stay here and extend and lengthen, go into your cobra or up dog or your plank, and you don't have as much going through your head. And you could always do plank on the knees and then go through, you know, and then go back into that downward dog here, or just keeping it low and working on, like putting all that pressure on the hands onto the mat. That's what I do think the blocks help kind of release a little bit of that pressure with, because you have that comfort of the blocks. So then maybe you're just lifting up here, you want to engage that core, and then maybe you're just taking the legs back, you know, or maybe you're taking them back with the blocks. Or if if you're pressing up, yeah, I would just say like just kind of keeping it lower or on that all fours modification. Yeah, just keeping, because if you're worried about the balance and the head thing, you definitely just want to keep that head in line. So it's just breathing, and then instead of doing the three-legged dog, maybe you're kicking the leg back instead, and then bringing it up. Like, so it's gonna give you that same, you know, you can get those same stretches, the hip opener, the lunge, and then raise up. And you can put another pillow or something underneath the back knee if you need extra support there. But yeah, I would say downward dog is definitely, it's one of those poses that you know, it can be surprising for people to realize that it's not that easy to get into. But that's why it's nice to have the block options, or honestly, I do feel like the chair is the best thing if you have that chair nearby, even if it's just the one. So when we're in our forward fold, you know, instead of going into, you know, all fours or your downward dog or through plank, say we're going for forward fold and then they go to plank and then downward dog, I would take my plank here and just lengthen and extend, and then take the feet back, and now I'm in my downward dog. And then you can still, okay, here's plank again, or here's my downward dog, or here's my lunge. You know, I would say keeping that head, you know, above and keeping that vision, just taking your time and letting your eyes kind of see like, okay, where am I? Maybe it makes your body feel better if the eyes are open instead of closed, because sometimes when they're closed, you can feel kind of off. And yeah, just I would say doing your downward dog with the chair is probably the best option if you're dealing with anything on the floor. Because you can even move up from your all fours. You know, it's a moment to still take your time, even if the teacher feels like, okay, move through this and this and this. It's your flow, it's your guide, you know, this is for you. So if you feel comfortable being here on all fours, I'm going, oh, they're going into plank, I'm gonna go here. And then I'll go to downward dog, you know, because you know where they're going. I would say, yeah, use your tools that you have, definitely. And then even when they go into downward dog to plank, you could still have that chair, and when they say plank and then side plank, you could just move your arm to center of the chair and side plank, which is wonderful too. And then move the hand back, because you want to make sure the weight distribution is even, so you don't want to have your arm on the edge just in case. So if they go, say, from plank and then side plank to your other side, take that to center, take it up. You know, you could even still do the leg up, and that's going to change for your traditional, because that's a big popular one too, is, okay, now I have to get off the chair and then go down to plank and then get back on the chair. But you can do all that in the chair. So if you're in your traditional downward dog, then you go to your plank and then you raise up. You can do all that in the chair, so it's nice. So that's a good one. Yeah, I would say that chair is amazing in that way. And then, because with the blocks, sometimes you still are low, or maybe someone just has something going on with the shoulders, that's going to add a little bit more support. So, wonderful question. Anyone have anything else, or no particular poses that they had in mind that came up, or anything going on in particular with the body?
The yoga can help.
Yes. Yeah, because they did not really show a lot of variations in the downward. But yeah, I guess that was just for my hamstring madness with that.
Think about my
Yeah.
tight shoulders.
Yeah.
And my getting more rotation on my neck.
Yeah, that's when that face yoga might be good. The head circles are always good with the rotation, the side to side. And if you want that deeper stretch, like that face yoga, you just open up with a big O in the mouth. And then close it and come through and go to the other side. That's gonna help stretch all those muscles. I like to do another good one. Yeah, just even little massages and different shoulder rolls, or the Vanasanas, always going that mountain pose, lengthening through that neck, and just bringing awareness and bringing the arms up, and those Vanasanas, dropping the shoulders down. That's gonna help. The antlers, or the goddess, that's gonna help. It's primary, you know, in the arms, but it's still, you're lengthening through that neck. And you can take it through, you can take them out, or you can take them up, or rounding. That's gonna help with the shoulders and then go into all that neck area. So that's a nice way to help get stretching through the neck, secondary. It's gonna help you.
I'm trying to think about pose that gets me the most strain,
Oh, the most strain.
like in my shoulders.
Yeah, usually if you're doing anything with the chair or on the floor, other than downward dog tends to bring a lot of stress in people's shoulders. It seems it's just this little corrections, or that other mountain pose. The forward fold sometimes, but having the blocks think a big thing
I
that
think
you're
it's
finding-
mostly like,
Yeah.
holding it up like this or,
Yeah, which then it's nice to have the strap or resistance band like you would in a workout class. I know Colleen uses them. If you have those straps, that's nice to use. You know, just wrapping it around the wrist or the hands. That's gonna help you to support one another. And if you're going up even from mountain pose, you know, into, you know, standing stretch and lengthening through, or bringing it in close to balasana, you know, having that connection or that extra grip might help. Or bringing it in close when you go side to side, that's gonna help to add that additional support and kind of tie. But really that's just building that strength through the shoulders too. That could also just be like if you have time and you're using the machines and the weights, doing some nice extensions through the arms and some workouts. Like how we do that, where we do our stretch in our arms, that's gonna help to strengthen the shoulders, bringing them in alignment, bringing them back down. Or like I said, if you're, just using the straps, I mean, even taking a nice stretch or having them aligned and going a nice side to side for the spinal twist. That's a nice way to work and strengthen those shoulders. And it's going in movements and directions that you would do in the yoga, so that might be nice. But yeah, that's a good strength whatever right there, strength trainer. So yeah, it's really the shoulders, I mean, they're gonna, and sometimes honestly, if it's tense, it might just be like so taking advantage of like, someone to give you a massage. Or some acupuncture.
alright,
But
can
really
you go
just
to
the
the
shoulder
sun
roll.
salutation right quick?
The sun salutation, like the full thing. So just depending, there are different ones. There's A and there's B. There's one for sunset, and one for sunrise, and one for sunset. Sunset, that was my favorite, and then now I just don't do it off the top of my head anymore. Sunset salutations are just the like beginning. Like kind of it helps people. That's like a good way to start and get into practice with aligning with your breath. I will do. Let's see. We'll start with sun salutation A because that is the one that I think I always forget that I should probably know. But usually, like you break it in pieces at some point. So I'll do the traditional, and then I'll let you know if I did something wrong. I'll have this as my notes because usually that's all we. When we're making our flow, we're taking the sun salutation and now breaking it up into pieces. So sun salutation A, if you want to get real critical or certain directions, so say you rise with the east and then go with, you know, when the sunset, what is it? The sunrise in the east and then sets in the west, so that's the way you want to direct. So if you're doing your sunrise, that's your sun salutation A. You want to start with a nice big stretch, that's when you're taking it up, and you might stop here, or you might take it into a big stretch going towards the back body, and then into your forward fold, going into your nice forward fold, getting a nice breath. And then maybe you take one leg back for a plank or a lunge. Then you take the other one back for plank. Dropping down. This is where you might do your cobra or your sphinx or your up dog. Then you might lift up. Then you would go into your downward dog. And then you would go back through plank. And then take your legs back into a lunge, into your forward fold, and raise up. So that would be your sun salutation A, which is a lot of what we broke down. So you could break that into chair. Yeah. Yeah, so if you want it that same, so yeah, doing that the same with the seated, which I think it's fun then to have a double seat really in front of you. You know, so if you're doing it seated, you're doing the same thing. You're starting in that mountain, you're moving up with the sunset, raising up and stretching, then going into your forward fold. Maybe your arms are extended through the chair. Maybe you're bringing it all the way down. Here then you might move into that plank so your legs would stay, but then maybe you're going back to like what we talked about earlier. So for your plank, maybe your arms are going out, lengthen and extend like you would in plank, lifting up, getting your cobra or stretch or up dog, forward folding down. Then maybe you move into your downward dog if you have that chair. You can do the seated downward dog, or maybe you take that tail up and do an up, you know, through your downward dog with the front chair. And then you might move through your plank again, do a little cobra or what have you, or maybe you find your way back into seat, and then do a plank stretch. And then you can just raise, but you go into, then you would go into, because you skip over the lunge, or you could do a slight lunge if you wanted back up, if you wanted an additional stretch. And then you would forward fold, and then raise it back up again. So that would be your sun salutation seated. You would do more of just the upper body, so you wouldn't have those extensions that would go back in plank. but you could adapt, you know, your plank and your stretches or your lunges as needed. So maybe you're plank, and then instead of taking the legs back, maybe you just do a little lunge. So it would just depend on how you want to adapt the feet for that. But yeah, that's a good one to ask about. Yeah, because that's what they start us off with. That's like our basics of yoga when we get started. It's always and wonderful. It's like the starting point, and then you kind of mix and match. Then people would go from that into their plank and side plank, and then would go into their warriors. So that's, yeah, it's like the foundation of that, definitely. So that one you would do towards the east for your sunrise. Then you have your sun salutation B, or sunset salutation B, which a lot of people don't even talk about, and people are like, I didn't know that there was a sun salutation B. But you would do that more towards sunset. And that one goes into reverse. That has a little bit more, see, now it's not on here. Is that one also, I can't find it. Yeah, it's more of the side opening. I wish I could remember. I have a video on it actually, and I can't remember it all, because we don't do it a lot. It's like your moon salutation. So your sunset A, your sunset B, and your moon salutation. And that one's more about like rising up, Vanasana. You go out for goddess, then you come out and do a lunge, then you take it back to goddess and come to the opposite side, lunge, you take it back up, Vanasana, you take it back to the other side, lunge, goddess, then lunge again, and take it back around. And they don't talk about it a lot in school, and I'm a sunset kid, like I'm not a morning person. And I love the sunset yogi because I feel like I do a lot forward and backward, like the sun salutations, A and B, so I like the side opening, especially if you're trying to work on opening through those hips. Then the moon salutation or sunset salutation might be something that you like, or salutation B, I guess it would be. A and B, but yeah, because A and B are like, they're like the same thing.
Just at different times of the day.
Yeah, different times of the day, so there's a few different moves that change. Right, yeah, fine. Yeah, they are the same. So I would say look up, yeah, sun salutation versus moon salutation. That's a nice way to get the differences. Then you get the forward and back, then at sunset you get the side to side, which is nice. But there's always ways to, then you would just take your lunges in your chair, you know, and then you can do your goddess, and then come to the other side of the chair, do your lunge again, have your blocks or what have you, do your goddess again, and you can always do your banasanas, of course, seated when you start again. Yeah, so it's nice. I love the banasanas. It seems like such a simple pose, but it's really just like, you want to make sure you really align those arms with your ears, and then take the side to side. Otherwise, you do have that adaptation where you can bring the arms low, and you really want to focus on those obliques and those sides, getting a nice stretch. So, yeah.
Anything that keeps you from stretching.
Yeah. Gotta work on stretching them out. That's a wonderful one though. It's nice to bring in. Yeah, I would say look up sun salutation and then moon salutation for the differences.
I would just try to connect with you on Instagram.
Yeah. It's Carmita Smiles. My name everywhere is Carmita Smiles. You will find it. I've stolen it like on every like part of social media stuff. I'm not on TikTok. Sarah, you'll not find me on TikTok, but yeah, I'm like, okay, I'm hitting my limit. There's too many now. I'm stopping. Because what was it? People were doing like the one with the ghost. What was the? I don't remember what it's called now. I don't know if it's
Okay, which one?
Yeah, there's no photo. The only one with the photo. So the top one.
That's the one I don't use.
Yeah. Oh, well, those hashtags are me too. That's actually all me. So yeah, we put that. Boom. There you go. Yeah, and I have the face yoga on there. I'm trying to think how far down, but if you like, just go down, you'll see like a bunch of different like yoga poses and things that I do. And usually in the descriptions it'll say, but I think the one for the face yoga, I'm sure it's on there. I wish on Instagram you could, you know how like on business pages on Facebook now, you can search on their business page like what you're looking for. There's actually a search box. I wish they would do that on Instagram. Because sometimes there are people on Instagram who'll post something, and then I'll go back a week later and they'll have like 8 new posts and I can't find it. I'll be like, chocolate cake recipe, Susan's page. You know, I wish I could go back to Susan's page and search and it would pull up. Maybe I need to call on Instagram. They love stealing ideas, so.
Oh, share.
Yeah, share, for a small fee. I would adapt and maybe do warrior 3. Colleen might do differently. Judy might have some other, things. And it's really just making sure the body feels good and, staying within alignment and making sure it feels, it's not uncomfortable. So if you feel like you're out of alignment and discomfort, that's not going to serve you best. So, yeah, thank you. I'm so
Like
glad
in
y'all
one
did that.
move and being able to figure out how to get back to it.
Yeah.
It's like a really valuable thing.
Yeah. Well, thank
I'm
you.
sure that came out of it.
Woohoo! All right, we're gonna take a